Hello everybody, lijepi pozdrav svima koji nas prate preko kanala Festivala povijesti Kliofest. Last year, a year ago exactly, we presented the first issue of our journal within the program of the Croatian History Festival Kliofest, which was held online. This year it's held in Zagreb and partly online as well, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to present the second issue, the second volume of our journal, which was published online in December last year, and maybe a month later we got it in the printed form, as you can see it here. So my co-host today is Robert Kurelić, as well from History Department in Pula, and the co-editor of our journal History in Flux. And the rest of the group on the screen are actually authors who wrote their articles for our journal. So Péter Vukman, Andrew Hodges, Juliette, Ronsin, Anna Aklan, and Lenka, Krátká. One author is unfortunately not with us today. And of course, we are saying hello to everybody else, all the reviewers, the copy editor of our journal, Elizabeth Salmore, the crew at the printing house of our university printing house in Pula. And I think for the short introduction, this could be all. And Robert, yes, you will say all the rest about the journal, right? Please.
Yes, thank you, Igor. A warm welcome to everyone, especially to our esteemed guests, the authors, without whom all this would not have been possible, and to all our viewers through the Kliofest YouTube channel. It is always a special feeling when a project that one thinks of comes to fruition, and I'm sure I speak for both Igor and myself when I say that publishing a second volume of a journal is maybe even more important than publishing the first volume, because it proves that there is a continuity of the project. And I'm happy to say that we're now presently working on volume 3 of the journal. So we're really hoping that this will be a beautiful tradition for our department, for the university, and, well, a small contribution to the field, since we will publish many, many more exciting and wonderful papers from many authors in the years to come. Maybe just a few words about the journal itself. This has been an idea for quite a long time in the department, that we should found a new history journal, that our department is mature enough to have a journal of its own dedicated especially to our field, since we already have Tabula, a journal for humanities, and we've chosen to publish it entirely in English because we wanted a platform for Croatian historiography to interact and communicate with regional and global history. And I think that both volumes and the forthcoming volume as well have shown and will show that authors from a number of countries from all over Europe have already published and will publish in History in Flux, as well as Croatian authors, and this will have exceeded the initial goal that we had. Naturally, we source the papers for the journals from 2 of our conferences that we hold in the department and around the department. One is Past, Present, and Future series that I have founded, I think it was in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And then the first conference was in 2015. I'm sorry, for a historian, I'm very bad with recent numbers. And the other one is, of course, Igor's Socialism conference that takes place also at our department. Just a brief announcement that we will have another Past, Present, Future conference next year. And of course, everyone, including our authors here and all of our viewers with an interest in history, are invited to apply. Hopefully it'll be an offline conference next year. We had to do it online last year, but we're hoping to transition to offline, or at least to a hybrid model. Another exciting news for the journal is that I've just completed an agreement with METCERN, a medieval Central European history network, who expressed interest to supply us with many papers in medieval history. Being a medievalist, I'm also very happy that that is now an avenue open to us. And now I pass the microphone back to Igor to just say maybe a few words about his conference for the journal.
Well, I think you already said the most important information about the conference. So it's Socialism on the Bench, Socializam na klupi, a series of conferences as well. The last one was held in 2019, a few months after the conference, which was held at the history department. So Anna Aklan's paper is coming from the department's conference, and the others are coming from the Socialism on the Bench. And the topic of that conference in 2019 was continuities and innovations. So that's somehow the main idea behind the papers here present in the journal as well. Another thing, Robert, we haven't mentioned is that the journal is, of course, apart from the printed form, it is available online through the official web pages of the journal within our university web pages, but also through Hrčak, the database of Croatian academic journals. So the first number, the second number, they are all there, open access, and everybody is welcome to browse them, to read them, to download them. And there are already thousands of visits there on Hrčak website for the first issue, as well as for the second one. Meanwhile, Elizabeth has joined us. Hello, Elizabeth, welcome as well. So the copy editor of this second issue. Robert, now the authors, right? Now, in which order shall we start? According to the order in the journal, Péter, you are first. So please, the main ideas behind your paper. What was it about? What you wanted to say and what you said with your paper, please.
Okay, thank you very much. In my paper, Living in the Vicinity of the Yugoslav-Hungarian Border, Breaks and Continuities, a case study of Herceg-Szántóvá, I was investigating how the frequent changes in Hungarian Yugoslav relations after the Second World War affected the everyday lives of the South Slavic minorities within a small community close to the Hungarian Yugoslav border. First, I would like to say a few words. What were the reasons I chose this topic? During my research on Hungarian and Yugoslav relations in the late 1940s and 1950s, I became interested how these frequent changes in bilateral relations influenced the everyday lives of those ethnic Hungarians and South Slavs who lived in the vicinity of the border. I wanted to see what impact these events had in the local communities, how did the locals respond, what techniques of adaptation and or conformity or resistance they used. And I chose Herceg-Szántóvá, a village in the so-called Baja Triangle, because this area, also known as the Northern Bácska or Észak Bácska in Hungarian, it forms a kind of a triangle, geographical triangle between Baja in the north in Hungary, Subotica in the east, and Sombor in the south in today's Serbia. It was and still is a multi-ethnic region where ethnic Hungarians, Croats, Serbs, and until the end of the Second World War, even Germans lived together. In the past, until the 20th century, until the end of the First World War, this so-called Baja Triangle was part of a Bács-Bodrog country and formed a geographical, economical, social, and historical unit. And during my research, I also had to realize that there were more dividing lines in the local community of Herceg-Santo and actually in the other local communities as well. And these divisions were influenced by ethnic, economic, social, geographical factors, and of course, individual motives also played a role. So in my article, I was examining these factors in the case of the South Slavic minorities living in Herceg-Santo. I divided my paper in two parts. In the first part, in a kind of introduction or introductory chapter, and in order to put my topic into a broader context, I provided the reader with some background information on the history of Hungary and Yugoslav relations after 1945, with a particular emphasis on minorities. I argued that the minorities were used as a kind of a political tool in the hands of the respective governments. I also argued that after 1945, the Yugoslav closely followed the well-being of the South Slavs, especially those who lived in the Baja Triangle. And however, after 1948, as the Soviet-Yugoslav conflict escalated, Hungarian-Yugoslav relations deteriorated dramatically, and the Hungarians started to regard the South Slavic minorities as Tito's fifth column. And these changes again had a profound impact on the life of the South Slavs in the Baja Triangle, and the normalization process after 1953 also influenced their everyday living. So after this introductory chapter, in the second chapter of my article, I focused on Herceg-Santo. First, I analyzed the ethnic and social composition of the village, and I argued that the local South Slavs, chose not to declare themselves Croats or Serbs during the local census of 1946 and the countrywide census of 1949, as they feared that these censuses were the first steps before their expulsion from the region, just that happened previously with the Germans. I also argued that regardless of these facts, South Slavs in general profited from the political changes that took place after 1945. And I found some interesting facts as well. For example, for me, it was very interesting to see how ethnic lines influence the political preferences of the local population. In Herceg-Santo, the South Slavs voted for the Hungarian Communist Party during the election, while the ethnic Hungarians voted for the Smallholders Party. So even ethnicity influenced their political preferences. After 1948, the majority of South Slavs adopted a kind of a wait-and-see tactic first. Most of them still supported Tito's policy in private, but they became rather passive. And I can also see some form of a silent opposition as well. For example, Tito's portraits remained hung on the walls of the taverns and pubs, and someone or some people painted "Živio Tito," "Long live Tito," on the walls of many houses. I think it is also very important to mention that local and nationwide politics were not always congruent. For example, in 1950, on the Liberation Day parade, the local South Slavs were marching under the Hungarian and Yugoslav flags during this period. And because of that, many were arrested by the state securities, but even local ethnically Hungarians and the ethnically Hungarian secretary of the Hungarian Workers' Party objected this arrest, as they wanted to normalize relations with the South Slavic minority in the local community and not to escalate tensions. And in the last part of my second chapter, I wrote about what happened after 1953, when the normalization in bilateral relations restarted. And I argue that it was again a turning point on the local level. The mood in Herceg-Santo maybe can be best described as hope and fear. The local South Slavs had confidence in the future. Many of them were sure that there would be some kind of a border readjustment. Some thought that the area, the Herceg-Santo and Baja Triangle, would belong to Yugoslavia in the near future. And in this case, we can see clear continuity, because similar feelings were manifested after 1945, during 1945-1946, then the same emerged in 1948-49, and now in the mid-1950s as well. And the South Slav minorities also kept their favorable opinion of Tito, and the process of normalization seemed to justify their feelings. And on the other hand, local Hungarians had rather mixed feelings about these developments, because they were worried about the border readjustment and feared that the local South Slav would again get into dominant positions and maybe take revenge for the previous hardships. At the same time, I mean, even Hungarians hope for the improving bilateral relationships would result in the fall of Rákosi and the emergence of a Hungarian Titoist leader. And finally, I would also like to mention that my research is still ongoing. So I presented some of my first results in this article, and I'm sure that the more detailed analysis of the effects of nationwide politics on the everyday lives of Hungarian South Slavs living close to the border is a very interesting and hopefully fruitful topic for the future as well. So thank you very much for this small introduction.
Thank you, Péter. Thanks a lot. And we are moving forward to Lenka, and to Czechoslovakia and Czechoslovak seafarers. Lenka, please, not more than 3 minutes, if possible.
Yeah, of course, if necessary, stop me. Yeah, that's my article is based on a 3-year project aimed at business trips from Czechoslovakia abroad from 1948 or 45 to 1989 to Velvet Revolution. In the article, I joined this broad topic with my long-term research interest in the Czechoslovak ocean shipping company operated in almost the same period. Maybe I can share the secret information here with you that ocean shipping is also a part of our family history. Yeah. And as for the shipping, Czechoslovakia began to develop its ocean fleet after the Communist Revolution 1948, mainly due to Cold War development, but still it was a landlocked country. That was necessary to find a place located as close as possible to the border as a base for the ships. And after the Iron Curtain drew, Szczecin, situated 300 kilometers far from the border, together with other Polish ports, represented a good connection point with the sea. And thus all the main Polish ports, Szczecin, Świnoujście, Gdynia, Gdańsk, are rather frequently mentioned in the Czechoslovak seafarers' memoirs. And they are not only ports which the men visited on their voyage and spent there some time or even experienced some adventure there. In many cases, these ports were the place where Czechoslovak seafarers disembarked before going home for a holiday or a short visit and before their retirement. Then, in this sense, the Polish port represented a steady place between the two homes of Czechoslovak seafarers, on the ship without a family and in the homeland with a family. And the article reflects several main aspects of their lives in the second home in Poland. It is based on archival documents and also in oral history interviews. When I should mention one of the important outputs or findings of the project or of the article, it is a close personal relationship and generally positive perception of Polish colleagues, dock workers, other seafarers on the one hand, and a rather distance from Poland as a country, mainly from political issues on the other hand. Here, I mean primarily the solidarity movement. And an important variable explaining this distance from politics and I say it in quotation marks, was the seafarers' professions, specifically the mental distance of life in one's country in the socialist Europe of the time. And besides, you can imagine the threat of loss of the job was at stake and explains these attitudes, mainly when we consider how exclusive this job was in the context of inland Czechoslovakia with travel restrictions posed by the authoritarian regime. So when I would stop here, and my last sentence and last comment is to Elizabeth. Thanks so much for your work, for your typing and copywriting, and it was very, very useful for your cooperation. So Igor, that's enough from my part.
Thank you, Lenka. Thanks a lot. It's good not to discover everything. You have to motivate, the readers to look for the article and
yeah,
read.
Of course.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. And now we are moving to France, Juliette, and the Yugoslav workers in a Peugeot factory. Please.
Yes, in my article, I wanted to analyze the effects of the political, social, and economic ruptures of Yugoslavia and France on the trajectories of Yugoslavs recruited by the Peugeot industry after the 1965 Franco-Yugoslav bilateral agreements on the employment of temporary labor. So I'm using a monographic approach to the case of the employment area of Sochaux, which is a city in France where Peugeot is located. This study is about a generation of workers born in the 1940s and 1950s and recruited by French industries such as Peugeot and some other industries from 1965 to the present day. I also include the link with the other generations of the family and, for example, the children of workers. The history of Yugoslav immigration to France has rarely been the subject of research. There are, for example, many researches on Gastarbeiter in Germany, but much less in France. So I'm also studying the relations between a Western country and a communist country and the consequences of the breakup of a country for immigrants living abroad. And finally, this article is relies on archival sources such as files on foreigners kept in the archives of prefectures, archives of associations, and the Peugeot company's archives. And I made also interviews with former workers around the city of Sochaux. And I want to also thank a lot Elizabeth.
Thank you, Juliette. We'll hear Elizabeth later on. And now our next author is Andrew. Andrew, and the destruction of shipbuilding in Croatia, specifically in Pula, right?
Yeah, that's right. So
tell us what's going on here in Pula with shipbuilding.
Okay. Yeah, so my paper's called Between Emic and Etic, Systematic and Creative Destruction During the Croatian Shipbuilding Crisis. And it's really following exactly what was happening in Pula in 2018, mostly, around the time when the Uljanik shipyard was on the verge of bankruptcy and they were looking for a strategic partner. There was talk of mass layoffs and so on. So, and my article is really about how one subset of people in Pula voiced their kind of discontents, how they channeled kind of almost a political discourse directed at Uljanik shipyard and at different political actors. And what's interesting is the use of this trope, systematic destruction, and how it's repeated quite often by different kinds of actors and directed at different people. So some people were directing it at the Croatian government, others were directing it at the IDS, others were directing it at the people who work at the Uljanik shipyard in management positions. and really the article's following how these different people use it. So I start off with an ethnographic vignette. So the method I use is ethnography, and I discuss a May Day in Pula that year and all the kind of events and what was at stake really when the vice mayor, I think it was, who spoke, and various other people addressed the masses. So what's going on here is I'm building up a sense not only of place but really of time, and this article is really about one specific moment, and this whole discourse that's mobilized is really about, it's partly about the powerlessness which is felt in that moment, but it's also a way of politically directing it. So it's a discourse that has real effects and that you most likely associate with more anti-establishment options in Croatia. Some of whom, as we have seen, I think you could even include the political party Možemo in this. Some of them are now in power, for example, in Zagreb and other locations. So it's also about political events that are taking place in Croatia right up until this moment in time. So I'm not going to go into lots of detail about who was accusing what of whom and how. I'll leave that for you to read. I just finished by saying that it also links to a much wider literature on post-Yugoslav labour transformations and deindustrialisation. So this article was part of a project that I conducted in Regensburg with part of a much larger team who were researching other shipyards, the Gdynia shipyard as well, in Poland. And it links to there's quite a wide body of anthropological work as well. You've got authors like Ivan Rajkovic, Ognjen Kojanic, Dejana Jovanovic, who are all writing, Chiara Bonfiglioli as well, who are all writing exciting new works in this vein. So don't just read this, read their stuff as well and watch out for it. It's a really interesting literature. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So now we are turning to Anna Aklan, our last author today. Anna, please, your topic was Mahatma Gandhi, right?
Yes, thank you, Igor, and also thank you for inviting me to join today. When I first heard about the conference that was held in Pula in 2019, I felt immediately addressed by the title because it was organized around peace in history. And one of my research topics is nonviolence and especially Mahatma Gandhi's legacy. And every time when I was reading or talking about Mahatma Gandhi, the question always arose whether his legacy, his teachings are still valid today, are still relevant today or not. So I thought that for this conference, it would be really interesting to see the effect, the impact he had, or his teachings, his exemplary life had not only on India and its war of independence and its final success in gaining its independence, but also globally. So I chose 5 people, 5 exemplary leaders who acknowledged to have been influenced by his teachings and by his life. So I centered my article and my conference presentation around these 5 people. So it's kind of a tabloid of them. And 3 of them are actually, or became actually, Nobel Peace Prize laureates. So 3 of them were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and 2 were not, but they were still influential. They are in chronological order. The first one is, or was, the close associate of Mahatma Gandhi in his lifetime, and he continued his peace fight, his non-violent fight for peace in Pakistan, even long decades after Gandhi died. And his name was Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and his nickname is the Border Gandhi. So he was called after Gandhi because he worked in the borderland of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And his life is really interesting, exemplary, and it had a great impact on the peoples of Pakistan and Afghanistan. The second one was Louis Massignon, I think he's the second one, who is a French person who organized a circle in Paris, which was called the Friends of Gandhi. And actually he became a profound Catholic himself, but in a very interesting surroundings in an Islamic country. And all his life, he was working on mutual understanding between Islamic and Christian people. So that was his mission in life. The third person is Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who also acknowledges that he's apart from Buddhism, which is of course a non-violent religion. He was influenced by Gandhi's teachings. And I also wrote about, of course, another very important leader whose effect is still actual in our everyday lives, and especially in the United States, who is Martin Luther King. And the last one, who is the youngest of them all, is a female leader, Malala Yousafzai, was shot by Taliban terrorists in 2012 because she was fighting for girls' rights for education. And ever since then, she's continuing her mission. And also she is one of the youngest, or she is the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate. So I really warmly recommend this article also next to or besides the other interesting articles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Well, I hope all this was enough to motivate our viewers at the moment to become our future readers and to read the articles and to peek into the first issue of your journal, of the journal possibly as well, and to wait for the third one. A lot of articles are already here with us, and I hope Elizabeth will be with us for our third issue as well. But before that, Robert, please, take over and let's hear what was going on with language issues and what usually goes on with the language when non-native speakers are writing in academic English.
Well, we only have one native speaker present here, and that's Elizabeth. So definitely us non-native speakers.
Sorry, and Andy as
well.
Oh
yeah, sorry. Sorry, Andrew.
Which can be a specific trouble, you know, when a native speaker is trying to correct another native speaker. We obey, but maybe the native speakers as authors don't obey whatever the copy editor says. Yeah.
Again, my apologies, Andrew. I'm so used to listening in conferences and reading papers from non-native speakers that I completely forgot the fact that you are actually also a native speaker.
Yeah, and if there's one thing that's more difficult than editing a native speaker, that's editing another copy editor. So Liz had a work cut out.
So this was a battle of copy editors. That's an interesting topic in on itself. But my question for Elizabeth, with regards to copy editing, proofreading, how peculiar is it to proofread papers in a specific field? So I remember, since I also studied German, and I did a little bit of translating in my early days. And I had to deal with technical texts with machine industry and blueprints for houses. It was very difficult for me because those are not terms that one usually encounters. So in general, how difficult is it to proofread something that is very specific, very narrow? These are all contemporary history papers, all the papers in this issue, for example.
Well, in this case, it was actually kind of a labor of love because my undergraduate degree is in history. So this was kind of like a mix of all of my professional background. So I was able to use my undergraduate degree. I've taught academic English to non-native speakers, specifically Serbian speakers, for about 14 years. And I have a lot of experience with editing native speakers. So this was kind of like a combination of everything that I have experience with, but I do edit in fields that I am not so familiar with. And it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of research involved to make sure that the sentences are constructed properly, that the right prepositions are going with the right verbs and so on. But generally, writers tend to know the terminology in their own field. So that's not so difficult. There have been one or two situations where, for example, I work for some psychologists who do a lot of factor analysis, and I don't have any background at all in that polish it off.
Sorry, I lost you for a moment there. I think there was a problem maybe with my internet, but my apologies. Sorry, my
internet connection is not so great.
And with regards to this volume, do you have any anecdotes you'd like to share, or any have you encountered any curious tidbits or serious problems? Well, probably won't talk about
I honestly have to say, and I'm not, you know, just saying it for the sake of saying it, but this was really one of the most enjoyable group of authors to work with. Your papers were so interesting, and I really felt like we were working together in a mutual process to create something that you as authors were comfortable with. So this is, I think, the first time when I interacted directly with authors instead of through the editor, and it was a really nice experience. I really enjoyed it.
So you would recommend that we keep this procedure in the future?
Well, of course.
I would like to.
If it means I get to stick around, sure.
You have to stick around, and we will keep this procedure. Yes, and there will be more more papers for our next issue. So be ready for that. Yeah, please.
This is also maybe a good advertising thingy for our journal, that we have proofreaders who interact directly with authors. So it's another thing that might become a staple or a standout for History in Flux. And thank you very much, Elizabeth. It really has been a pleasure working with you. And I think that all of the authors here have had a good time cooperating with you and learning from you, and vice versa. So thank you. Thank you all, really.
So,
and maybe if Andrew, who raised the topic, could give us maybe a sentence or two of how was it working with another proofreader?
Yeah, it's happened a few times. Yeah, working with Liz was great. She picked up on lots of just little things like commas and things like that. And everybody has blind spots, even as a copy editor, like you have blind spots. So it's always good to get another pair of eyes to look over the text. So yeah, it was a great experience. Highly recommend working with Liz.
Yeah. I have to say, you sound very British, but you read American.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But Andy, your paper was already written in American English, or was there additional work that Elizabeth had to do in Americanizing your English?
So it was already pretty much written in American English. What I speak is what I speak sounds British, but what I write is halfway between American and British, because I've been so long in these academic international circuits. So, and I'm fine with American, fine with British English. So yeah, it's really just some small differences. So.
Okay, Robert, is this the end of this presentation?
Well, I'm sure we could talk.
You're welcome
for
to
a long
conclude.
time.
You're welcome to conclude, please. Yeah.
Yeah, well, for all of our viewers who are watching us over YouTube, I wish to thank you for your attention. I hope this has been an interesting presentation. I hope we've piqued a little bit of interest for our for our journal, and hope to see you again next year for the presentation of volume 3. And I also hope that all or most of our authors will be back with us in the future. If not for volume 3, then for volume 4, 5, or 6. Thank you very much. And a great thank you to all the authors and Elizabeth, of course.
Of course.
And thank you, Igor, as well.
Thank you as well. Bye-bye.